services out. I mean, it was, I'll just take care of it. I mean, contract for $100,000 for snow removal for the winter wasn't a big deal. And 10 houses. I mean, so. But that's where I've seen it work. I've never seen it, small, like that little community. There are only 6 houses there, and that would be an unwieldy burden for us. Until it's fully built out. He, I don't think, realizes how much that actually costs. He said, "Oh, well, I'll take care of it." Really? Like you take care of the weeds and have taken care of the house across the street and keeping the kids from going over and using it as their makeout point. I don't think so. So, and that's just. But I don't know. It's where he's headed. And that's what he wants to do. And he tried to get approval. And I don't know whether it ever was approved. It's set up for it. It's got electric wires and everything right to it.
It's infrastructure.
Yeah, he's got it all set up for it. So that was his original intent. But I don't think it ever happened. And the city came in actually and took care of the crosswalk issue that's right there on Buckdale Trail across from the junior high. There's a new crosswalk. There's the 4. It's awesome. It's so much better. So it narrowed the street there, but it also slows down the traffic because it's narrow. So it's like, that's brilliant. So I think it killed 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't even know if that was
30 seconds, gentlemen.
That was helpful.
We on. Gentlemen, 30 seconds. Okay.
No, not yet. But I'm looking at costs.
Yeah, that stuff's right off the edge.
Thank you. Chair up there.
The chair up there. At least it's not one of the wobbly ones.
We'll call to order the October 10, 2013 meeting of the Woodland Park Planning Commission, and we'll have our call to order and our roll call.
Thank you. DeVoe.
Here.
Watson.
Here.
Mattingly. Here. Probst.
Here.
Rollinger.
Present.
Schrader. Stannard.
Here.
Vogel.
Here.
And Yoxheim.
Present.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum this evening with 8 members present.
If you'll join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And currently not functioning.
Yes.
First item is the approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Everybody had a chance to read them? Mr. Rollinger, do you have any corrections or additions to them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on page 2, they're very minor. 1, 2, 3, 4th item down begins at this time, Mr. Craig Ketchum, Coraline. Square feet of roof space pavement, whether or not an environmental impact study regarding wildlife areas is done, whether infrastructure needs, how about to be improved? I mean, this is part of the official record, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. How about to be improved? Thank you.
Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes in a second as amended?
Motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item, request and our public hearings. Case CUP 13-005, SUP 13-001, and SPR 13-003. Delaware County Waste, request for for the city's review and approval of a conditional use permit, special use permit, and site plan review for the purpose of operating a business to provide contractor services, vehicle repair and maintenance, and a recycling collection center located in the northwest one quarter of the northwest one quarter of Section 25, Township 12 South, Range 69, west of the 6th principal meridian, more specifically 1000 and 1050 County Road 231 West Street, Woodland Park, Colorado, as requested by Jay Baker, owner of Teller County Waste. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and I will turn this over to our city attorney, Aaron Smith.
Thank you, Chairman DeVoe. And Chairman DeVoe and members of the Planning Commission, from time to time, you have an application in front of you that's either been the subject of a previous process in front of you or the subject of previous proceedings in front of City Council, or which may have been the subject of some level of discussion in the community. And tonight is one of those situations. And in that case, a best management practice, an appropriate protocol for the Planning Commission to go through is to have 2 questions asked of every planning commissioner. And the first has to do with your discussions, any substantial discussions you may have had about the matter before you prior to tonight's hearing. Those are, as you know, ex parte communications, and they are not a flaw to the procedure tonight, but it is important, if you have had substantial discussions about the matter, to go ahead and reveal those to your fellow commissioners and the members of the public here and the applicant here tonight, so that those are a matter of the record that you'll be making your decision on. So that's the first question that would be asked of you tonight, and the chairman's prepared to poll each commissioner on that question. And the second question is the question that deals with whether or not you've come here having already made up your mind on how you're going to decide, or whether you are here tonight prepared to make your decision based on the evidence that will be presented to you. And I will poll the commissioners on that question once the chairman gets through with asking you about any prior discussions you might have had. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, the first question being, have you had any ex parte communication that would influence your decision tonight in this hearing? And we'll have Ms. Riley poll the commission.
We'll begin with Mr. Yoxheimer.
I've had no previous conversation about this matter, at least substantially.
Thank you. Mr. DeVoe.
I've had no previous conversation about this matter.
Mr. Watson.
No.
Ms. Mattingly. None. Ms. Probst.
None.
Mr. Rollinger.
I've had none.
Mr. Stannard.
None.
And Mr. Vogel.
I've had none.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then the second question, and that worked well, so I will leave it to Sally to call on each commissioner, but I will ask the question, which is, have you come here tonight prepared to make a decision based on what you hear during the public hearing without having already made up your mind on how you're going to vote?
Mr. Yoxheimer.
I've the only information that I've had is the package that they sent out, and that is the only information I've had, but I am prepared to make a decision based on whatever the public has to say tonight.
Thank you. Mr. DeVoe.
My decision was based on what we reviewed this evening.
Mr. Watson.
Same.
Ms. Mattingly.
I'm prepared to make a decision on what we discussed this evening.
Ms. Probst.
I did go to the site today and did a site review, so with that and then what we hear tonight, I can make a decision at that point.
Mr. Rollinger.
I'll make a decision based on what we hear this evening.
Mr. Stannard.
I visited the site today as well, and but I'm prepared to make a decision based on what we discussed tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel.
I'm prepared to make a decision based on what we reviewed tonight.
Thank you.
We shall move on to staff presentation.
Thank you, Chairman DeVoe, Planning Commission. We are here this evening to discuss the application from Mr. Baker for a conditional use permit, special use permit, and site plan review. And we have all been present for various public hearings, and you know the process, but I thought it would be helpful just to briefly review the 11 steps this evening that the hearing will follow. First with the staff's presentation, and then the applicant's representative, Tim Seibert, is here this evening to follow up. Planning Commission has opportunity to ask questions of the staff and the applicant. Then the chairman will open the public comment portion of the meeting. After everyone who is interested in making comments has had their opportunity, then the chair will close the public comment. The applicant has the opportunity for a rebuttal. Then Planning Commission continues to ask questions until you are ready to move into your deliberations portion. This is the portion of the meeting with which you begin to express your opinions and why you feel that way based upon the evidence. Then at that point that you feel a motion is ready, the chair will have a motion, a second, an opportunity for any last discussion, and then a roll call vote. This property, the last time you saw this was on May 23rd. It was in making a recommendation regarding the zoning for the Teller County Waste site, and the annexation ordinances and the zoning ordinances went through its statutory process, and City Council approved the annexation and the zoning on August 15th. So just a couple months ago. And with that, I wanted to just orient you toward the zoning map and the community commercial zone that was selected for this site is consistent with the other hot pink areas along Highway 24. They also extend up Highway 67, and then on the east side of Woodland Park along Highway 24 and up Baldwin and Rampart Range Road. This, you'll recall from our zoning discussions, is not the most intense zone in the city. It is also not the least intense zone. So it is a zone with which contractor services and vehicle repair maintenance is allowed with an approval of a conditional use permit. The recycling collection center is slotted in our zoning regulations as a special use permit, and it can be located in any zone as long as it can fit within the 11 criteria that we will be reviewing this evening. I also wanted to share the comprehensive plan map that was recently adopted in the 2010 comprehensive plan, and this property is in a pocket of commercial property that in 2010 was outside the city limits. So this area was slated for commercial development in the future based upon the comprehensive plan map. A few photos of this site, and these were taken prior to the May meeting. This is the existing building that will function as the vehicle repair and maintenance facility. And this also shows the access drive and the slope up to the upper tier where the recycling center will be located, and the parking of no more than 12 vehicles to service Teller County Waste, and the employee parking. You'll see that this is now a gravel area. This is all going to be hard surfaced as a result of the improvements to be done, and I'll speak more specifically to that. These are two photos that I took from Highway 24 up above the property. So you can see that it is adjacent to a major arterial to Woodland Park. However, the primary access is off Teller County 231, which is a collector street in the Teller County classifications. And this gives you a good view of how the trash vehicles and trucks will be parked behind the building and behind a buffer wall. This is taken from Teller County 231. This is an existing driveway that goes to the second building on the site. There is a small home that was built in 1960, and this home will be converted into an office building for the operations of Teller County Waste. This driveway will be abandoned and reseeded so that there will not be any transfer of sediment off this driveway. And then the lower picture is taken so that you see the side of the building, and this is the Turner's property that is right in front, and there will be a fence that will sit up here next to the building, a 6-foot-high fence, and then it will transition down to the property line, and that will be an 8-foot-tall privacy fence. And I wanted to point that out on this photo. This is the Turner's home that sits directly adjacent to the subject property, and here is their driveway. The other homes that are close by in residential zones are to the south and also to the west, or east. I'm sorry, these are to the southeast. And then to the west, here's the entrance, the existing entrance to the west is property that is owned by CDOT. It is leased by Waste Management, and their lease with CDOT is on M1 property. To the opposite side of the road is Aspen Valley Ranch, and that is zoned agricultural. So there's quite a mix of uses in this area. Moving on to the site plan submittal, this is the cover sheet to the plans that were in your packet, and it carries a legal description and specific data. It also shows the fencing and the berm and the wall structure that will be placed up on the level, the tier above the shop area and the office area. So you can see that detail. There's also some lighting specifications or a cut sheet. There will be new lights on the building, and I'll point those out when I show you the elevation. And they will be full cutoffs. They meet the dark sky standard. And then this is also an exhibit of the gate that will be installed at the entrance to the yard and the recycling center. These specifications deal with the seeding of the area so that we can have a high altitude uplands, low water, low growth seed. The second sheet deals with the site plan itself, and Mr. Seibert's going to go into great detail, but I'll just point out a couple of features on the plan. First, this will be the new the entrance paved, or concrete actually is what they're going to install, to the back portion of the property for the yard area. The recycling packer truck will be positioned here, and on the smaller diagram it shows the traffic plan for the general public who will be utilizing the drop-off center behind the shop area. And then this is the new driveway that will connect up to the office area. And between the office and the employee parking and the truck parking will be the berm that's landscaped with a 6-foot-high block wall, and on top of that will be a 6-foot-tall solid fence. So in essence, there will be a 12-foot buffer berm structure that will isolate the employee parking, the truck parking, and the recycling area. The next plan is the landscaping plan that has been detailed to add significant amount of trees, evergreen trees, some deciduous trees, aspens, as well as shrubbery. The fence that I spoke of next to the Turner's property will start right about here and stay on the top of the hill adjacent to the building, and then transition down to an 8-foot tall fence all the way to this point in the back. I might point out there is an easement that was recorded many years ago that accesses the property to the north. That easement will be preserved through this process, as well as a gravel driveway. This property is currently unimproved in unincorporated Teller County. The next plan is for site grading and erosion control. There's really fairly limited amount of site grading. The yard is flat and that grade will not change. The majority of the grading, it deals with the berm and the wall fence structure, but there will be protection of any sediment or erosion control through silt fencing and other means for best practices. The drainage plan was prepared by John Schwab of JPS Engineering, and it shows that the drainage will be collected on the yard area in a curb and gutter system along the base of the wall. It will be directed into an inlet, and this is a new structure that will serve for a sand filter for water quality and detention. The detention of the storm runoff is oversized so that there is plenty of capacity to detain the runoff from the upper level, the majority of the flat area, and then it will be released at historic rates. There will be an 18-inch concrete pipe that will be underground and then outlet into the existing concrete ditch that functions very well along County Road 231. That water all eventually goes down through Gray Horse Ranch and then down to Fountain Creek, eventually through a network of other detention ponds and ditch lines. There will also be a curb and gutter system that will be placed in this parking area that will serve the office. So the drainage has been reviewed by Bill Alsbach and has been approved to meet the criteria for Woodland Park. Here are the architectural photo simulations. The top photos are the current buildings as they exist today. The enhancement to the shop, the vehicle maintenance building, will include a stone veneer on the front to decorate up this lower portion, and then a new awning over the door to make that more inviting. That will have some lighting underneath it. There's an old Cobra head light that exists on the building today that will be replaced with the fully shielded downlit light, and then the building will be repainted as well as the doors. For the office building, it will also receive some landscaping and a new coat of paint. Want to talk a little bit about the traffic because through the annexation process, the applicant engaged a consultant to do the traffic impact analysis, LSC, and then also engaged a consultant to complete a geotechnical roadway evaluation on this section of West Street. One of the conditions is that the trucks utilize this portion of West Street for their daily routes, except for 2 days a week when the trash trucks are servicing the neighborhood. But for the majority of the trucks, and there is a limit, right now there are 7 trucks that service Mr. Baker's business. There is a limit that only up to 12 trucks will be allowed with this conditional use to service the business. So there is a build out on this business as a result of the annexation and the conditional use. But what was discovered in these analysis is that LSC determined that based on our population and a certain percentage of people that may use a recycling drop-off area, that they predicted 111 average daily trips to and from the site as a low, and up to 165 average daily trips. Currently, with 7 trucks, no recycling center, there are 32 average daily trips. On West Street, it ranges the average daily trips under 1,000 average daily trips. This addition of growth and the recycling center will increase the existing traffic by 5.2 to 8.9%. So what the geotechnical survey said was that the existing road surface was in good shape. It has 1.5 inches of chip and seal over a very stable native granular base or soils. The geotechnical report recommended that for the impacts with this use, it would be advisable to do another layer of chip and seal, either 3/8 inch or 3/4 inch chip and seal overlay. The applicant agreed to that, and in fact, the annexation agreement was written so that he would complete that by August 1st of next year and secure those improvements up to $19,500. And if he did not do the improvements by next year, August 1st, then that money would be transferred to Teller County for them to complete the work. However, Teller County's standards did not match with what the geotechnical engineer recommended. Teller County's standards, in order to meet an adequacy level, and Brian Kincaid is here this evening, and he is the expert on the highway standards for Teller County if you have questions about that. But the adequacy standard really requires an additional inch of asphalt overlay to meet Teller County standards. So we've had a disconnect with what the geotechnical engineer had proposed and what Teller County was expecting based on their standards. Yesterday, the staff, myself and Bill Alsbach, Brian Kincaid, Fred Clifford, and Cheryl Decker, we all met and discussed how can we possibly remedy this disconnect. It would require Mr. Baker to contribute approximately $40,000 for the 1-inch overlay. He has been advised of that, and we are going to continue to negotiate and remedy that disconnect by the time we get to City Council. So this evening, with your deliberations and your review, we would want to make you aware that we are ongoing discussions with the applicant and Teller County so that we can establish the road improvement agreement prior to the City Council public hearing. Lastly, I wanted to, your last attachment to your packet is a breakout of all the improvements that Mr. Baker is going to complete as a result of the conditional use permit, special use permit. And those costs, I know you can't read this, so the total cost is $237,107. And the annexation agreement requires that Mr. Baker secure these improvements in order to motivate him to get them done as quickly as possible. The city will hold an escrow amount or security at 110% of that amount, or $260,815. So that's a quick overview of the proposal and the improvements that are being proposed. Now we will quickly review the 11 criteria and the justification for recommending approval with 8 conditions associated with this application. The first criteria for a conditional and special use permit is that there's a demonstrated direct need for this use to be located at the proposed location, and that there is adequate mitigation measures to lessen the identified impact. The solid waste collection is a critical need for our community. Recycling collection centers are also needed for an environmental sustainability. Visual screening from the surrounding uses by the existing grade change, as well as the 6-foot wall and berm and fence totaling 12 feet, and the 8-foot high solid fence adjacent to the lot, also mitigate many of the impacts with this use. The additional landscaping is important as well. The noise attenuation is accomplished with the berm in the back and the trucks, as well as the applicant has agreed to disarm the backup beepers on the trucks while they're in the yard. He has also agreed that the operation of the site will be from 6:30 in the morning. He normally would be starting at 6 a.m. in the morning, but he has compromised to start his truck engines at 6:30, and that he will only run or warm up the diesel engines for 15 minutes or less if it's not necessary. The truck access from Highway 24 is required by all trucks except for 2 during the week, and there are limited hours of operations throughout the week. The trash trucks will operate on Monday through Friday, and the roll-off trucks. The recycling center will have the hours of Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and on Saturday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And there will be on-site supervision for the recycling center. And if any of you did use the drop-off site at Walmart, we know that when it's a voluntary site, there's oftentimes issues related to that. So they are dedicating staff to be supervising this site. Criteria number 2 deals with the use shall not endanger the public health and welfare. There was a Phase 1 environmental assessment completed as part of the annexation process, and it concluded there were no environmental concerns on the existing site. The applicant will be removing the existing septic systems and connecting to the city sewer by removing that risk of old failures of leach fields and septics. The applicant will be connecting to the city water supply, therefore allowing for safe and reliable water for cleaning and for the staff and the public. There will also be a requirement for proper disposal of waste fluids, and then we will be able to evaluate whether there will be a need for an oil, water, and a sand separator. And lastly, the recyclables and trash is collected within a fully enclosed packer truck, which do not impose a health risk. Number 3, shall not substantially injure the value of vicinity properties. Believe this complies. There have been similar uses on this site and has been in existence since '94. In fact, the shop was first built in 1985, and it was used by Books as an auto repair center. It's been a welding shop since 1992. Mr. Baker has used the site since 1994. There are significant upgrades to the site, including the landscaping, the hard surfacing, drainage, and architectural enhancements, and that will mitigate an eyesore. The recycling center is properly buffered and supervised. Criteria number 4 is that the proposed development and use shall be in harmony with the area in which it is located. This complies because it was zoned industrial and agricultural when it was in unincorporated Teller County for many years. Now community commercial, that is in essence a down zone to that property, which means it's a less intensive use than the industrial, for example, and then there's a variety of uses that agricultural can carry as well. Again, significant enhancements to the site. It's adjacent to US 24, which is a major arterial with 20,000 average daily trips, and it has convenient access via the signal at the intersection of US 24 and County Road 231, Collector Street. Criteria number 5 talks about the objectives and policies of all city plans. This area on the comprehensive plan map, which I showed you initially, is identified as Teller County Neighborhood Commercial. The comp plan objectives encourage economic vitality and via a critical service for solid waste collection for our community that provides an economic basis. The recycling center meets the objective for environmental sustainability, and this provides an opportunity for contractor services to be located adjacent to Highway 24 but outside the Woodland Park Central Business District downtown core, and so it is consistent with the pattern of commercial property in Woodland Park, community commercial. The city is capable of providing water and sewer services to the site, and County Road 231 will be upgraded. Criteria number 6 talks about conformance with the city regulations, specifically the zoning regs, subdivision, utility, building and construction, business regulations, and engineering specifications. The site will conform to all relevant building codes and fire codes. There is the addition of a fire hydrant at this site, which will help the entire neighborhood. The site improvements do meet the zoning and engineering specifications, and the applicant is required to process a subdivision plat to combine these tracts that are currently deeded by meets and bounds description, and that subdivision plat is required to be submitted before November 13th, and then it must be recorded before the certificate of occupancy is issued on any remodel. So we have been in conversation with the surveyor, Rampart Surveys, and he is planning on doing a submittal in the next week or two. Criteria number 7 deals with the on-site and off-site traffic generation. I've reviewed the results of the completed traffic study that shows they anticipate between 111 and 165 average daily trips. This collector street, which is averaging a little bit under 1,000 average daily trips, can easily handle that traffic. The geotechnical report recommended the chip and seal treatment, and we will be negotiating the 1-inch overlay with Teller County to meet their adequacy requirements with the applicant. Criteria number 8 is regarding the topography and the surface drainage and any man-made hazards. There is no significant grading that will occur here. In fact, the existing trees and native grasses and shrubs will be retained where feasible. There are no streams or man-made hazards. The refuse will be emptied from the trucks on a daily basis, or they will be emptied the next day when they complete their routes. So they will be held within the packer portion of the truck, which is completely enclosed and contained. The drainage system I have described to you that will collect, convey, detain, and release the rainfall will also be filtered through a sand system, so will help with the water quality. Criteria 9 deals with other utilities such as water, wastewater, solid waste, air quality. Mentioned earlier, the water and sewer mains are located in West Street, so the applicant will be able to connect to those main systems after purchasing his water and sewer taps. The solid waste is going to be handled on site adjacent to the recycling area in a small 96-gallon tote. No refuse will be taken out of any garbage truck on site. That is a condition of the annexation agreement. Roll-off containers that will be stored in the 2,000 square foot area, designated area, will be emptied and clean. Air quality effects are mitigated because the trucks meet the state standards for diesel trucks. Proper warming up of those engines will be limited to the 15 minutes or minimized to the extent possible. The detention pond has a sand filtration system, improving water quality again. And the site is required to be monitored daily for any airborne paper or litter. Item 10 is to not increase the fire danger or explosions. Mentioned earlier, the construction will comply with the international fire codes, and that proper safety protocols will take place with the vehicle repair. Item 11 deals with architectural design, fencing, landscaping, buffer areas, or other aesthetic enhancements. we've described the site improvements for buffering and fencing and landscaping. I've described the new architectural treatment to the shop, including the stone, the new paint, a canopy, and the full cutoff light fixtures, and the sprucing up of the former house with new paint. Lastly, we've talked about the 8-foot and 6-foot high fence, which is going to be placed adjacent to the property line between the residence and the office. So those are the 11 criteria, and the recommendations in the staff report are fairly lengthy, but there are 8 general areas. The first area are the criteria dealing with the contractor's office and yard with the vehicle repair and maintenance. The first item A, 1A, is the limitation on the operation hours. Item B deals with the exiting and entrance of the trucks throughout the week. Item C is that all the roll-off containers must be cleaned and emptied, and that no refuse or debris may be stored on site within the roll-off dumpster area. The commercial trash truck that picks up mostly the dumpsters from restaurants and other commercial businesses, we understand from Mr. Baker that that truck will be emptied daily. So there will not be the refuse from the restaurants or other commercial businesses that will remain on the site overnight. To alleviate the truck noise, the backup alerts will be disabled while in the yard. The entire parcel and frontage road will be policed for litter on a daily basis. We will also have our code enforcement officer conduct bi-monthly inspections of the site. This was something that the neighbors were especially concerned about, that they felt that if the city was going to move forward with this, then we needed to honor the enforcement of the site. Then lastly, item H, the growth of the contractor services business will not exceed 12 trucks or trucks of equal size. I put that in there because some trash companies have gone to smaller trucks. So if they had a standard large size truck and replaced that with 2 small size trucks, that would give the operator the flexibility to do that. So those are the parameters dealing with the contractor office and yard and vehicle repair. Number 2 deals with the operation of the recycling collection center, that the drop-off center will be provided free of charge to the citizens, that it will operate Monday through Friday. I thought that was supposed to be 8. I'm sorry, this needs to be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. The drop-off center will be supervised with an on-site attendant. Item 3 is prior to a zoning development permit approval, the applicant will submit detailed site plans or a detailed plan explaining what will be done with the used fuels or fluids, not fuels, fluids from the maintenance operation. Specifically, will there be a parts washer? And this will help us determine if an oil, water, sand separator will be required. Number 4, prior to issuance of a zoning development permit, a final site plan and associated construction drawings shall be submitted and approved by the city staff. Item 5 This is a comprehensive list of the terms and conditions in the annexation agreement that are important to acknowledge and continue forward into the conditional use, special use permit. So the various sections are referenced, and they contain conditions such as, thanks Lisa, that the transfer of trash is prohibited on the site. Currently, there's a definition of the interim operations that Mr. Baker is operating under until the conditional use, special use permit is acted upon. The completion of the required improvements to the site and the addition of the roadway improvements to Teller County 231 are acknowledged in the annexation agreement. There shall be a deposit of 110% for all the site improvements that you reviewed in attachment N that equal $260,000, almost $261,000. There's a requirement to remedy the questionable area, which is a quiet title is going to be deeded over to the Turners of an area that cleans up this questionable area. There's the subdivision application that is required to be submitted by November 13th. The purchase of taps and the connection into the city's water system. The payment of the water development fee. The purchase of a sewer tap, 2 sewer taps, and the connection into the city's water system. Abandoning the septic systems, and then payment of a reimbursement agreement to Pikes Peak Regional Hospital. That's in order to connect to the sewer line. The hospital extended their sewer line, and there is an existing reimbursement agreement for that. The last 3 conditions prior to the zoning development permit, all 3 of these, the applicant shall pay the necessary transportation capital fees as calculated by the city engineer, and that's based on the average daily trips that are generated above and beyond the 32 that are there today. The applicant shall pay the stormwater capital fees for any new impervious surface, if there is any. I believe that most of the yard is already considered impervious because of its compaction. And then lastly, there will be a need for payment of fees in lieu of sidewalks. The city has a requirement that any new commercial or substantially improved commercial property above 25% of the value of the buildings, then sidewalks are either installed or fees in lieu of sidewalks. We felt that the fees were more appropriate here than to build a small section of sidewalk in front of this property. So with that, that concludes the review. Thank you for your patience. And I'll answer any questions at this point, or we can turn it over to the applicant's representative.
We're going to be able to come back and ask you questions after the applicant.
Absolutely.
So why don't we continue on and let the applicant come up with our presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tim Seibert with NES Incorporated here representing Teller County Waste with this application. Sally did a very thorough review of the plan and the criteria and all the application submittal materials. So I will try and keep my comments brief, talking a little bit more specifically about some of the site plan features, but I will try not to duplicate a lot of the comments and information she provided. As was discussed, the site is 1.83 acres, located off of West Street or County Road 231, immediately adjacent to Highway 24. It is currently zoned community commercial within the city of Woodland Park. The request today for the uses on the conditional use permit include the contractor office and yard and vehicle repair and maintenance shop, and then the special use is the recycling processing collection center. As Sally discussed, the site plan itself, the boundary represents that 1.83 acres at this location. You can see West Street or County Road 231 is in this location. Highway 24 is up the hill to the west of the site. You can see the substantial grade reflected in the site plan that was illustrated with the photographs that Sally provided. Generally, the site will be utilized. This is the existing shop building today. There are 2 garage doors that face towards West Street. Those will remain, and there will be a small portion of an existing concrete apron that extends to the front of that. As was discussed, the driveway that's currently serves the former residence will be abandoned, and that driveway will be combined with the driveway in front of the shop area, providing access to those 2 garage doors, and then up to the few parking spaces associated with the office building in this location. That area will be paved, hard surface. As Sally discussed also, there will be a curb and gutter to manage the stormwater runoff from that area. That paving will stop in this location, and this is the existing gravel road that was on the property that will provide access to the property owner immediately to the north. There is an access easement for that property with some of the issues associated with the property line dispute and the questionable title. The exact location is illustrated on our plan based upon what our surveyor believes it was there. Ultimately, though, that same access that's existed on the site will be maintained through that area. Specifically, no trucks are allowed to have access up along that roadway. Again, that is only for access to that property or to do any maintenance for the landscape area to the north of the office building. As you come back to West Street, this will be a primary access for the operations component of the project. There are landscape improvements at the front of the site, and I will discuss that when we get to the landscape plan. But the driveway is a 30-foot driveway that will be consolidated at that location. There are some existing structures and trailers along the south boundary line that will be removed as a part of this effort and cleaned up along the south boundary. There will be a new retaining wall constructed in this area to allow for that 30-foot driveway to come up and around the site. The existing building, as you saw from several of the photographs, provides a screen in this location, but we're connecting onto that with that fence and wall structure that will wrap around this portion of the site and connect back into the grade of the hill that exists there today. That area will be bermed and landscaped, and behind that will be the vehicle parking area in this location for the contractor trucks, and then employee parking in this area to the north. There is a 2,000 square foot contractor storage yard for empty roll-off containers in this portion of the yard up against the slope along Highway 24. The recycling drop-off collection area, as Sally discussed, is in this location. Again, trying to maintain a screen all the way around with both the structures as well as the fence and wall. Again, you can see on this plan the berming and landscape condition. Here's the cross-section for the area in this location. So there will be a 6-foot block wall installed with a 6-foot fence, and then additional landscaping being planted on that. If you visited the site today and went on to the upper yard, One thing to note is that the existing block walls are out in this general location, and the new wall will be located further in order to accommodate the grading. So in order to get the slope condition here, the wall from its current location will need to be moved inward to the yard to accommodate the berming and screening and landscaping in this area. Sally also discussed the 8-foot fence that will extend from the northern property line along the property line with the Turners to this location, turn, and at approximately this location aligning with the back corner of the house, it will become a 6-foot fence for this portion with an 8-foot fence along that northern area. Again, additional landscaping will be planted along that buffer area, and then additional landscaping will be installed along the frontage along West Street. There is additional landscape area in front of the shop entrance at these two locations as well. We will be reseeding this driveway. However, we will not be planting any trees in that location because that is going to be our access location for our water and sewer connections to come to the office building. We'll come through that existing driveway. Once that installation is complete, then that area will be reclaimed. Also, again, illustrating from the circulation diagram for the public drop-off, again, trying to contain that activity behind the fence and of the building and the buffering with entrance coming in here between 8 and 5, as was mentioned in the conditions. Vehicles will come here, stage, drop off recycling in the Packer truck, come back out and circulate back out to this intersection. This is the grading and utility plan. Again, this is the yard area. You can see the retaining wall and the berming and grading that will take place up against that wall. So again, the berming and grading from the current level of the yard is in addition to that. So it's the current level adding 6 feet of fill in a berm condition up against a structural wall with a fence on top of it, and that's how this plan illustrates it. Sally discussed the detention pond, which is located in this location. You can see a diagram in the lower corner here. That's an excerpt from the drainage report that illustrates the sand filter basin that's to be used. So it's a detention and stormwater quality feature within that structure to manage the runoff in this location and then discharge out into the concrete ditch along the road. We also are cutting in a swale along the edge of the driveway to ensure that runoff from any of the gravel area of the driveway is brought down into this area with the native area along here remaining in its natural state. Also on this plan, you can see the utility connections, water and sewer, again, coming up through the old driveway and connecting into the office building. With the shop building, you can see water and sewer connection coming in up through the main entrance driveway. There are additional improvements today. There is a culvert along that driveway that has been collapsed and no longer adequate to get the drainage across. So a new pipe, concrete pipe, will be added across both of those driveways to remedy some of the drainage issues along the frontage of the property as well. Facilities operations, here's a quick summary. Again, 6:30 start time for all vehicles in the yard. Sally discussed the 15-minute warm-up period for the diesel trucks as a maximum to 5:30 p.m. Again, for the vast majority of the year, that is not a problem to meet that 5:30. Obviously, there are weather occasions up here that some trucks get stuck in more rural portions of the county and may come in after 5:30. But again, by and large, those will be the operation hours. Recycling drop-off hours for the public commence at 8 a.m. Monday through Friday and will close at 5 p.m. Again, that will be a monitored recycling collection center. Saturday, we'll have a reduced hours from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., no collections on Sunday. Again, truck start time at 6:30 in the morning. Typical truck return times, again, are between 3 and 5. And Sally discussed the noise mitigation of the backup beepers. Those alerts will be disabled through a switch on the dash, and will be managed by the driver. For the review criteria, Sally discussed the 11 review criteria. We provided our comments, I believe, that as well in your packet, and I won't go through each one of those items. The recommendations, the 8 recommendations, but quite a few sub-recommendations that were in there have been reviewed by my client and accepted, with the one correction of the 7:30 start time for recycling to 8 a.m. And we are in agreement on the improvements and the cost estimates and all those conditions that were outlined for you in the staff recommendation in your packet. Again, because Sally did a very thorough job on the criteria and those other items, I've kept my comments brief. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments you may have at this time.
I have a few.
Go ahead.
Okay, because I was out at the site today for
Sure.
quite some time.
Okay.
The property, and I know north and south, but the one that sits up high that is leased out, there's a bunch of open trailers or dumpsters or whatever it is.
Up on this portion on the upper yard.
Yeah, way on the far side, as you're looking at the building, it would be up on the left-hand side.
Oh, those are to the south there, to this area.
What's going to happen with that?
That is owned by Colorado Department of Transportation, and they have a lease with Waste Management for those container storage. That is not part of this application.
I noticed out in front of the proposed shop there's a lot of scrap iron and a lot of that's going to be taken away.
That's all part of the welding operation that is currently being removed out of the building at this time.
And then up top in that yard, there was a lot of firewood.
And that is also on the former portion. So the original industrial portion of the property was approximately here, and then this was the agricultural piece. The previous owner of that area operated some firewood business, and that debris is currently being removed at this time.
Okay. And then I also, and I think you might have already addressed it, but there was a trailer on the proposed driveway on the left-hand side of that driveway.
Correct.
And up top too, that appeared to be used for storage.
And those trailers that are along this driveway on the south side, that area will be removed. Those trailers and there's some walls and things that are going to be moved along that south boundary line as that property gets cleaned up.
Okay. And then once that fence is installed, is there something in this condition that fence is going to be maintained?
I guess I will answer it, give you my opinion on how the code reads. If the fence is damaged and it becomes a code violation as a part of the screening and buffering requirement for the property, so it would need to be repaired as would be required as part of that maintenance. I think we'd be willing to agree to add that maintenance requirement if that's desirable.
Well, it just seems like it's going to be a real eyesore if it's not properly maintained. It's going to get aged and deteriorated, and that's in a pretty open area. There's going to be lots of winds and things. I would like to see something in there that's going to assure that fence is maintained properly. And then I guess the one other question, because I did drive up roads and around and came back down, that's quite a slope where that entrance is going to be up to the top.
Correct.
What about snow removal? Because I can see coming down that hill and having a real challenge going out onto West Street.
The property owner will need to manage the snow removal. We provide areas as required by code for snow storage on the site in different locations, and one of those locations is straight up the driveway for that snow removal. Obviously, that's a critical issue from an operations standpoint, and snow removal will be part of the property owner's responsibility.
And then the only other concern that I had, because I drove up and down West Street quite a bit, it seems like the south side, I guess, has the drainage ditch on it. But on the other side of of West Street, there's not really a drainage ditch. The asphalt is cracked, and in not very good shape. Will that be addressed at the time that they have to come in and do the chip and seal?
I guess I'll yeah.
I don't know who can answer it, but
The drainage, I can answer it to my greatest extent, and then Sally can add anything if I've misspoken or need further clarification. So drainage is coming into the site into the concrete channel that exists. As you're driving south, it would be on your right-hand side of the road, on the uphill side, if you will, of that roadway. And then that follows that path of drainage that Sally discussed that ultimately discharges into Fountain Creek further to the north as that drainage travels north towards town and then makes its way east to Fountain Creek. As a regard the roadway on the south side, there are no plans for drainage improvements on the south side. As a part of the chip and seal operation or the asphalt overlay operation, obviously that edge would be receive the treatment consistent to manage its wear and tear.
well, and I'm sure that the roadway is the proper width, but I happened to pass one of the trash trucks while I was driving up and down, and so it's kind of narrow. And going this way and having the broken chip and seal and a little bit of a drop off, that to me would be a concern for that traffic. And I don't know if that's something that Teller County's going to have to address. If they're going to have that many trash trucks, coming and going.
I think with the overlay, that will be addressed to hard surface and to feather out those edges of the road. That area on the south side of County Road 231 is undeveloped. It's part of the Aspen Valley Ranch. So it's likely that if that does get developed in the future, then more improvements would be done associated with that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
I've got a couple of questions. I didn't notice on the drawing, is the driveway into the recycling area going to be gated?
It is.
So it can be closed after hours?
Yes, sir. There is a gate that'll be located at the bottom of the hill, two 15-foot swing gate sections that'll swing out and will be closed. There was also didn't discuss it, but as part of the discussion with the neighbors about video surveillance to make sure that people don't just drop off recycling in the middle of the night to try and manage some of that refuse or blowing recycling or other issues that might occur in those off hours during when the recycling drop off is closed.
Right. And the operating hours of the recycling area extend till 5 p.m. on weeknights. Midwinter, that's probably after dark. Is there going to be some additional lighting in the recycling area?
There is a light on the building here, and a light on the back of the building. Same full cutoff fixture on the back of the building as well.
Okay, I guess you should make sure that that's going to be adequate lighting for the recycling area if people are coming around 5 o'clock to unload their vehicles. That there be lighting, and of course that lighting probably be off after hours.
And we have discussed relative to the site lighting a timer or some operations. I mean, I think there's a balance between making sure there's security. We talked about potentially a motion detector for lighting in the off hours after the lights have been switched off. And so those are some specifics that we can work through with our final site plan to make sure those specifics are.
If you stay with the cutoff type fixtures, you'll probably be all right with that.
Okay.
Tell me what the composition of the 8-foot fence is. Is that cedar?
It'd be a cedar fence, cedar pickets on that the Turner side of the property. We haven't really designed the post yet. Obviously, there's a wind load issue with that, so we may be using galvanized post or metal post to ensure that wind load condition is adequate, so it doesn't blow over.
And cedar fences require periodic staining in this climate?
Correct.
So is that the property owner going to take care of that?
Yes, he will.
Yeah, so I would pay into the maintenance of that field.
Sally, do sound, are there any kind of standards for sound attenuation? I know the berm seems totally adequate to attenuate sound, but is there any standard decibel limits or anything like that?
Our noise ordinance is a compilation of a number of different criteria that when the police are called out to evaluate a noise complaint, they have to determine whether it meets those criteria, and it does not carry a decibel amount or measurement to it. It's more of a descriptive, loud and unusual noise during awkward times, and so there's a judgment call on that.
Okay, so there's no way to determine whether the berm will reduce by a certain amount from to? Okay, thank you.
Speaking of noise, I understand the backup is a noise issue for the neighbors, but isn't it a safety issue to turn those off? We've got public, people driving in the private area doing the recycle, and these giant trash trucks. It seems like a safety issue.
The trucks are parked overnight, and so the backup time is when they leave the yard between that 6:30 and 7 a.m. period of the day. The recycling drop-off doesn't open until 8 a.m., and so operations in the yard for that backing up of those vehicles is only occurring, that first initial shift when the trucks leave the yard in the morning.
So when they come in the afternoon, 3 o'clock,
They're pulling straight into their yard. If they do need to back up and reposition, there'll be a employee that's managing the drop-off recycling area back there to manage the safety of the yard.
Tom?
One question for Sally. Are there sufficient employee parking spaces, considering we'll have truck mechanics, drivers, office personnel, et cetera? Caterer?
If I can maybe address that, and Sally can add to that. So again, we have accommodated 12 contractor yard parking spaces for 12 vehicles, commercial vehicles in the back. That was a question that Sally had asked us in our first submittal, because we provided 12 contractor spaces and 12 employee spaces in the yard area. I would note that the office employees, where I believe there are 3 employees and 5 parking spaces over by the office, so the office employees will park in a different location. We reviewed that with Mr. Baker. There are 2 routes that for the commercial routes where they have that's the Monday route and the Friday route that Sally also discussed is that's the days for pickup of the commercial users. That's the wet refuse issue, and so in order to manage dumpsters, they have 2 employees in that truck. All the rest of the trucks just have 1 driver. And so on those 2 days, they do bring 2 extra employees in there. So we have 14 employee spaces on the upper yard, and then we have the 5 parking spaces down by the office, and 1 mechanic space that would be parking at the office area as well.
Thank you. Another question. You referred to the access road, which will be maintained, will not used by trucks, and goes up the north and connects with what's the property directly to the north that needs access?
It's the property here is the Gillen property, and I believe he's in the audience. I just had a conversation with him before the meeting about maintaining his access, and so it's access to his property. And I don't know 100% of the history, and maybe he can provide that, but I believe when CDOT did widening, the access to his property was removed, and so an easement for that was obtained through this property.
Is
And
that a
so
single-family dwelling, or is it a commercial
it's-
structure, or what is it?
I believe it had a single-family home on it at one time. Today, I believe it's vacant. And again, that's my understanding, and you can ask the property owner
If the
that.
driveway is
Yeah,
gone,
but I couldn't tell it was.
What's that?
if you're taking out that driveway to that access
We,
road.
we are not taking out that driveway. That driveway is going to be maintained. Our vehicles will not be able to access beyond the point that we're paving. So the property owner would be able to access up this driveway. So that, again, so the grading that's taking place is taking place from the edge of that driveway adjacent to the yard and moving back into the yard. And I talked about that with we're pushing the block wall further into the existing yard on the top, and that is to ensure that that roadway and that access is maintained for his use.
And who will be maintaining it?
That would be our obligation to ensure that it is passable. With development of his property, then there would be, I'd have to look at the terms of the easement on then if there's a use up on that property, then we'd have to discuss and understand how that easement, the terms are written. But we have to maintain and provide that access to his property through this site.
And that access road is gravel, correct?
It's gravel today.
And the property to the north is in Teller County, right?
Correct.
Well, one last question. When we had the capability to recycle at Walmart, actually it was fraught with problems, but one of the problems was the containers filled up very, very quickly. In other words, there just wasn't enough space for everybody who was bringing their stuff
Sure.
to Walmart, and of course it was piled outside, et cetera. Do you feel you've got a good handle on how much space you need? Because I have a feeling folks are gonna flock to that site.
Well, a little bit of background. Currently, Teller County Waste does curbside recycling pickup with their service, and so we would assume that Teller County Waste customers are adequately served at their residence. There is obviously the site in Divide now. The waste management site also does collections. And we went through a lengthy analysis and included Sally in this discussion about how much population is in the county, how much of it resides within the Woodland Park area, how many customers of ours currently get curbside. So we did this analysis, and we did all of that work to determine our traffic numbers. So I think that we've done a thorough analysis of how our trips and our usage would occur. To manage the space itself, there are two Packer trucks that will be used for recycling. So if you came to utilize this collection center, there would be a Packer truck that has a recycling symbol on the side. You would take your recyclables, put them in that truck, and leave off-site. As that Packer truck gets full, the Packer truck combines. Also, it's a single stream recycling processing site or collection site. So there's no separation of paper or cardboard or plastics or tin. All that goes into the hopper of the Packer truck. When that gets full, there's another vehicle parked in the contractor parking area here that then can be pulled over into that area. The other truck can leave in order to take that full recycling down to the Best Way Recycling Processing Center in Colorado Springs.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Question.
Okay.
That expanded driveway that's coming up there,
Yes.
how high is that retaining wall?
The retaining wall varies. Obviously, as it gains in height, it gets to approximately 8 to 9 feet on that backside.
Okay. When people turn in there to drop off recycling, that's going to be dark. Because, especially in the morning, because the sun will be blocked by an 8-foot retaining wall. Is in your lighting plan, are there lights to light up that steep driveway that comes up to that to get back to the recycling center?
The driveway is on top of the retaining wall.
On the top of it?
Yeah, so the site goes.
So the other part's below it?
You're right. So what's below this area immediately to the north of this little landscape area is low and is at the same level as the front door of the shop building here. And so the retaining wall is being built up in order to make the grade come up around the site. So the back of the yard is high relative to the shop finished floor elevation.
Lessens the grade.
Well, the grade is still steep. It lessens some of the visibility.
Will there be a light at that intersection?
There is again, we're planning a full cutoff fixture on the back of the building at this location. With the recycling drop-off starting at 8 a.m. in the morning, except for probably the shoulder period we're in right now. Right. I think the concerns and the questions about lighting in the evening during this time of the year, I think is a valid concern, and we'll look into that.
Let me ask another question. The landscape area that you have on that runs along the road. Okay, and that calls for an 8-foot fence along there, I believe. Where you've got the little square showing where your fence starts there, just behind the proposed office building.
Yeah, our fence is here.
It goes 8 for a while, then drops down to 6.
Right, our 6 foot section is in this area,
and then it
our
comes all the way down to the front where you come up in.
Actually, along the front, there is no fencing along West Street at this point in time. The fence comes to here as 8 feet running along this entire boundary, turns towards the office to come up on top of the hill, and then extends to here and ends.
What's the purpose of that 8-foot fence?
To provide some additional screening to the Turner's property, which is immediately adjacent. And Sally went out and met with them specifically on site to review that.
Their property is to the right of that fence?
Correct. Their property sits right here.
Okay. Very good. It's landscaped. You've got this pretty berm you're putting in there nobody's going to see.
We hope. That's the plan. One of the things also is that we are also doing a fully automatic irrigation system. Now that we have central water, all the landscaping on the site will also be irrigated. So, that's that maintenance component not only of our fences, but also of our landscaping.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I had one additional comment or question for Sally. Having our city code officer conduct bi-monthly inspections of the site. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do that monthly, early on, and see how things go, and then maybe you can go to bi-monthly. But I would think every 30 days certainly wouldn't be too much at the outset, because a lot can happen in 60 days.
Well,
that's fine. We can do
I
it
would
on
make a commitment on the planning commission that I'm going to be driving by it on a regular basis.
And I failed to mention one item that we have promised the neighborhood, which is a construction schedule. Obviously, Mr. Baker is currently operating out of that site as an allowance through the annexation process. And so one of the things that we're working on at this point is a construction schedule with timing of the improvements and how sequencing of the construction will take place, and providing that information. And so we're working on that, and we will be providing that to staff in the neighborhood as well, so they can understand timing of construction and the improvements. Obviously, as Sally mentioned, the financial assurances of the $260,000 will be held until all the improvements have been inspected and approved and accepted by the city, and then that release of those funds would be made at that time. And that is also, correct me, Sally, if I misstate this, that once the inspection is complete, that's when the recycling collection can begin. So the use of the recycling collection on site cannot occur until all the improvements as specified on the plan are completed. So that's that additional use, and that was a question the neighbors had asked at one point, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was clear and that we understand that that's a requirement, and we'll be motivated given the $260,000 worth of assurances we're providing the city. So,
Any other questions of applicant or planning?
For Sally, time frame as far as the landscaping is concerned, obviously this is October. I would think trees and things would not be planted until springtime. Is there a flexibility in there to give them time next spring in order to get the landscaping in?
I think it's our intent, and we did discuss this at the annexation stage, is that we need provisions. It's hard to pave in November and December, and it depends on the weather. One of the reasons that we went to concrete instead of asphalt paving is it provides us flexibility in pours that can happen in maybe not as asphalt requires the asphalt plants to be open and operating, so we can get a little bit of jump on that, and also do the concrete paving in sections and sequence it more appropriately. So those are some of the schedule issues that we were going to be identifying. And then clearly, we can't do landscape installation until probably May at the earliest, depending upon how tough our winter is. And it could be June, July before we're calling the city for inspections. But once this is approved and we have to post our assurances, the city holds on to those until that final inspection, and yes, that means they're holding on to that money until we can get our landscaping fully installed as planned.
But it wouldn't stop the operations from going forth just because the trees weren't in yet, because there's...
It doesn't stop our current operation, but does not allow us to begin the recycling collection.
I guess I have a question. This one kind of directed towards Sally and yourself. So all the surrounding property owners, they know that this is going to be built here. They know that a recycling center is going to be built, and that there's going to be trucks coming, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, and they've all consented to this, for this to be built, this to happen, and they're okay with it.
I would think you'll hear from them. The Teller County Waste has been operating on this site. It's currently, or previously, it was zoned M1 in Teller County and has been used in this general capacity since about 1994.
Any other questions?
One more. Will you be able to use Woodland Park or Teller County contractors, suppliers, landscapers, et cetera, to any extent, or will most of the folks come from down the hill?
I believe that Mr. Baker has been a business owner here in Teller County for a while, and I expect he's going to be utilizing as many local contractors as he can to get the work completed. So I can't commit for him specifically, but I believe that'll be the case. He's clearly has lots of connections with the construction industry and other folks in town. So
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for me?
If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Probably see you again on rebuttal. At this point, we will open for public comment. Okay, and the first person to sign up for public comment is Ms. Allen. You got to say your name and where you're at and all that kind of normal stuff.
My name is Diane Allen. I am one of the adjacent property owners, and I appreciate Chairman DeVoe, Attorney Smith, and the Planning Commission for this opportunity to speak.
Sally, excuse me, could we get that map up, the aerial that shows...
Where we're at?
Uh-huh, sure.
If you were driving up and down the road, you went right by my house.
I know. Thank you.
So, this is, how does it work?
This is Diane's house right here on Main Street.
First of all, the first thing I'd like to do is clear up. This keeps coming up about historically, about this M1 property. And I just want to let everyone know that, yes, it was zoned M1 with the county, but Also, I want to bring up the fact that Mr. Baker has been operating illegally there since 2005, when there was a court order that told him that he was operating without a permit, and he continued to operate without a permit with the county. And so, even though I keep hearing that he's been grandfathered in, I don't know how you can be grandfathered and be operating illegally grandfathered in. So that's just a comment I wanted to make. What I'd like to talk about today, though, is just some different terminology, I guess. The Woodland Park Municipal Code 8.04-010 defines refuse as, and I won't go into all of it, but it starts out with, starts out with grass, but then goes shavings. Then it says paper, okay, that's recyclable. Ashes, rubbish, containers, boxes, glass, cans, bottles, those are all recyclables. Garbage, waste, et cetera, is refuse. Just want to make sure we're straight on what is refuse. And when you go to the staff report that's dated October 10th on page 2, if you want to follow along in the middle of the paragraph, it says it is important to emphasize that no trash will be transferred from the collection trucks to the containers. The definition of a transfer station is a site where refuse and recyclables are collected, sorted, handled, and stored in preparation for processing. The transfer of trash is not permitted in this city. Well, if you go to Section 7 of the state regulations, they say a transfer station is where refuse is generated off-site and it awaits transportation to approved solid waste disposal site. Well, we know that Mr. Baker is taking his trash down to Bestway, which is a solid waste disposal site. And we also know that people are driving up and they're dropping their trash off and they're transferring trash from their vehicle to another vehicle. And therefore, to me, this is a transfer site. This is not just a site where transfer is not happening. And since transfer of trash is not permitted, I guess I don't understand that. And in addition, back on August 15th in staff report, Sally mentioned that, however, the collected recyclable materials would be manually unloaded from a separate compartment to a wheeled packer truck that will be transported to Bestway Materials Recovery Center. Now, is that no longer the case? That was August 10th, staff report.
The questions after they're done. Okay.
Is that how? Okay, that's fine. So that's one of my questions. Is this truly a transfer station? Because if it is, then we get into some state regulations. For example, where public dumping is allowing separate access for passenger vehicles, it has to be provided if this is a transfer station. And that's listed in 7.2.2 number B. And in addition, there has to be a buffer zone of 200 feet from any residence. And this is where the county was coming from. And this is why there was a lawsuit against Mr. Baker and company. And that we were supposed to have the November court date because of the fact that there are a number of homes within that 200-foot buffer zone. So I think one thing we really need to figure out is this a transfer station, truly, or is it not? According to the state, it is. But last time I checked, I think we're still in the state of Colorado. Although we have the nation is kind of shut down, but I think we're still operating. All right, next what I'd like to talk about is in the CUP, the Teller County Waste Conditional Use Application, it talks about that they're seeking the conditional use, Teller County Waste is, for contractor services and vehicle repair. And I met with Sally earlier today, and I still would like to understand what contractor services are, because there's nothing here that talks about trash. We still have trash trucks being parked and possibly being parked overnight with wet refuse. And maybe, like I said, maybe they're only going to be there for a day. But think about the fact that people have stored their trash for a week and it's been getting picked up. Let's say my trash day is Monday, but my trash has been sitting in my trash can for a week waiting to be picked up. And now it's going to sit there for another day on his site. So we still have this issue that we still have trash trucks, and we could have up to 12. It was 7. Now we're going to have 12 of them parked there, and you can't tell me that there's not going to be this noise, the smell, and the blowing trash that we've had in the past. This is what we've fought for 10 years. That's why we had a lawsuit.
We're getting close to 5 minutes.
All right. And so I would like that answered. You know, what exactly are contractor services, and when does his contract begin? When did it end? I mean, I guess I don't understand that. And then lastly, municipal code number 18.34-050, number 4. And again, this is your city code. States that adjacent property owners will be notified of any public hearings. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say we've had 3 public hearings on zoning, 3 public hearings on annexation, and now this is our first one for the CUP, SUP. So let's say we've had 7 total. Out of that 7, Mr. Gidland, who you'll be talking to here soon, has been notified of exactly 1. So I think that needs to be addressed. There has not been the due course that's supposed to happen here. That's all I have.
Thank you.
And yes, I'll be expecting some answers.
I'll be happy to answer questions now or at the end of the...
Well, let's wait and go through everybody. Elizabeth Turner. Did I pronounce that right?
Can I interject? I would rather hear her answers now, because I may not remember it. Well, then we've already answered their question, but I may not remember what her questions were at the end of several people talking. So I'd rather address them as we go. That's just
Well, the way this works is that the applicant has a chance to rebuttal of this, not after each person that speaks, but at the end of the public hearing. Okay, so that's the procedure that we use. Okay. And I'd really like to stick to the procedure, otherwise we're going to be going back and forth every time somebody gets up. Right.
Yeah. Are there
Well, you're on the list, I believe, number 4. Okay? All right. Elizabeth Turner and company. Could you please address us with your name and where you live?
Elizabeth Turner, 962 County Road 231. My husband, Jay. Actually, Diane covered most of what I had to speak to. The trash. The trash is a big deal for us. The trash being contained in the trucks overnight. That is, nobody's addressed the nuisance conditions of that trash being there. It's bad enough that there's noise, and it's bad enough that there's pollution, but then it brings in animals, and nobody's addressed that. And that's the nature of animals. They're going to come. They're going to smell. They're going to come. And in the past, we talked about bears being on the property. Mr. Baker's response was, he said he had seen 3 bears in all the time that he had operated there. And that's because he leaves the trash trucks in my neighborhood and doesn't take them to his. So bears are a big problem in that neighborhood. Another thing is the recycling center. I don't know that you're aware, but if the recyclables are contained in plastic bags, those bags are going to be ripped open and put in the packer truck, which means they can be airborne. And so I'd like to suggest that packer truck is in an enclosed building. Do you have anything to add?
Just a few things.
Okay.
I've worked with the EPA for 3 years. I worked on 2 of the state's largest Superfund sites, and I've worked as a geologist. We have a tremendous groundwater problem here, and with recent rains, I don't think anybody that saw that area would know that concrete ditch is insufficient 100% of the time. And all it really takes is just a pasteboard box or a tumbleweed or a gravel that comes from the land above this site to plug that ditch, and then it all flows. If it goes out of my culvert, at my house. It runs through Jill and Mr. Humble's house and 2 more houses. All the way down that concrete ditch, every one of those culverts have plugged at one time, and the water just flows. The sad story is that it flows through Gray Horse. These guys don't even know what's flowing there. And if this needs to be addressed, one of the things that happens, the first slug of water plugs the culverts. Then the retention pond releases its highest density of contaminants. If there's a collision, a fuel spill of some sort, hydraulic dripping, anything that can happen on that lot is going to happen, and it will impact the neighborhood. That affects property values and health. This is one of the worst sites you can imagine. It's not only uphill, but it's upwind. And every incident that happens on this site is going to impact those 2 subdivisions. Let's see. The other thing I see happening is this operation is going to go into full swing before there's any containment. We've had that for 10 years. The containment needs to be in place before this operation starts. And then that leads us to property values. Anybody that looks at our home will ask, what's behind the fence? How would you describe to anybody without losing property value what's behind the fence? It's not a shoe store. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you both. And we will address that later. And we'll remember. I remember.
I hope they're written down.
Well, I think Sally's taking care of that. Paul Gidlin? Same drill. Where are you from?
Yeah, my name is Paul Gidlin. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm from Lakewood at this time, but I own the property just to the north of this site. I did have some questions. I noticed there's screening on one side. You discussed this wood fence that goes from 8 to 6. I didn't see any screening to the north, to the boundary of my property. That's one question. Is what's up with that? Another thing is that
that map back up. It shows.
When we answer the question.
Okay, very good. We'll address that.
Okay.
Map back up.
This easement, and I heard it referred to as easement or driveway, or maybe that's one of the same. But if it becomes gated, is that the driveway that I would have to use when I request a building permit and build? Or is that a different access?
Different.
It's
Different. So in other words, my access would remain open all the time.
The driveway down at the bottom is just the one where the trucks and the recycling center is, and that's all by itself. The other driveway is the one that goes across to the property.
Good.
It's open all the time.
Okay. And the utilities that would go through a driveway, which one was that? The easement or the driveway? I heard the gentleman speak, the applicant said there would be utilities.
I'll answer that when he rebuttals. He just...
Okay, on your rebuttal. Well, another detail in this easement is my drawings and my work from the state when I got my deed and my easement, because they provided that for me. And some easements are implied because people drive to go access to a beach or to a house or a place, and that easement could be varied depending on where they drive because they have to get where they're going. Well, this easement is a surveyed easement with monuments that were put in, and the state uses a second order surveying. It's pretty high class. It's not a vague, but this survey, it doesn't agree with my survey, and it's a very big variance. It's substantial. It appears to me that some of these improvements are on my easement, and I didn't agree to move it. I mean, it could be moved, but I'm not against development. I like oil drilling, and I'm for that. I'm a civil engineer, but the easement here doesn't appear to be where it should be on this proposal. I wanted to ask if this operation would include metal recycling, whereas people would bring batteries, acids, and contaminated materials that they want to sell, and sometimes they're dirty steel, and they take it in various ways. But steel recycling, aluminum, any kind of metals, I was questioning whether, I didn't hear it discussed, so I'm assuming no, but I'm curious if that was part of it. And I also heard of buffer zones that exceed what I see here to my property, because I do plan to build on this land. And the contract services, I don't understand what that means, and if you grant this proposal, this could morph into a business that you didn't think was going to be there. That could be less desirable. And then the property values, that's a concern of mine too. So, and that was already mentioned. So thanks again for your time.
Gary Allen.
My name's Gary Allen, live at 1098 Main Street. You already saw in the map where I live. I'll start with two questions. Question why we have to be limited to 5 minutes when these folks get all the time they want, and over the summer we've had, maybe I've had 20 minutes and they've had 4 hours. I just don't think that's fair. I also think we should be allowed to have our rebuttal after he comes back again, because sometimes things are being said that are not true, such as, oh, it was a trash facility before I moved there. No, it was not. Most of us that live there, it was not a trash facility before we moved there. I just want to make that clear. Attachment 1 says conditional use won't bother your property value. It will be harmony of the community. We had over 75 people signed a petition against this that's been completely ignored because, oh, it's less than 1% of Woodland Park. But I guarantee you, over 75 people in that small area was far more than 1%. I have a question. Are recyclables going to be compacted on the site? Everybody doesn't wash out the recyclables like I do. And if you have oil cans, antifreeze cans, or plastic containers, and they get thrown in there, what's to say that stuff's not going to push out on the ground? Guess who lives downhill from it? Directly downhill. I know this is going to come up, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I asked Sally to call the state, get their interpretation from the state. What is a transfer site? She's going to come back and say, oh, but we're a localized community, whatever it is, we can do whatever we want to. We live in the county. It's violation of state law, and that's what the county goes by. And I don't think it's fair that the hiding in the city annexation is allowing these people to circumvent the state regulations. And I'm going to continue to fight this no matter what happens tonight, because we're going to finally get a hold of somebody from the state maybe that can come down if this gets approved. Traffic, we already talked. It's not a city road. So the county's going to have to be called, and the county's not going to be like getting called for if there's issues there. Also, there's such concern of mine besides the road condition itself, but turn lanes at the bottom of the hill at the light. If traffic starts piling up, then you have to wait 2 or 3 light cycles, sort of like I had tonight at West Street to get through. It's traffic can come back up. And also the traffic study doesn't take in consideration that we all know how much traffic is backing up through town every night. Well, guess where the unofficial Woodland Park bypass is? Right through there. And it's going to get worse all the time, because I guarantee you, if the county could afford it, they could place a cop there and issue quite a few speeding tickets every day. The attachment L, which is from the county, I sure hope you guys will look at that and read that closely before you make a decision. especially like number 2, it says Woodland Park City Charter says no building construction can occur and no building permits can be issued unless and until the adjacent county road is dedicated to the city and approved by Woodland Park as an official subdivision. There, especially section 7, I would like for you to look at. The impact and mitigation. You've been presented by Sally all the things they're going to do, and everything's lovely. But there's some things in here that's really important. 24 is a scenic and wildlife viewing area and things. Parking spaces are not dimensioned according to the size of the vehicles. And also, if they decide to go from 1 truck to 2 trucks, now wait a minute, you have 12 parking spaces. How do 13 vehicles fit into 12 parking spaces?
I believe you said 14.
Was it 14?
Yeah.
Okay. The noise study has not been completed. And then I would like to emphasize fire. Nobody has said anything, and I have not seen anything about fire truck access. A couple of you say you visited the site. Would you agree that that's a pretty steep hill? And I have seen motorhomes centered up because they tried to go over a steep hill and they centered up in the middle. Has anybody checked into that for the fire trucks? And also the ability of a fire truck to be able to maneuver. That's part of the rules should be, is the fire truck should be able to maneuver easily in that area. And that's like in section 7, letter O.
I can actually address that because they have specific fire trucks now that because of the narrowness of the roads and the topography that can get up and down those steep roads.
That'll clear that much of a...
Absolutely.
We have that in northeast Teller County? Okay, I didn't know that.
Trucks.
Okay.
We have steeper driveways in town.
Okay.
Exactly.
I also, there's just so many discrepancies in, this is not a trash facility. Yet criteria number 1, if you read your first few words, it said solid waste collection. Sounds like garbage to me. Solid waste collection. Correct criteria number 1, that's what it says. Seems like we use the words waste and garbage when we want to, but whenever our group brings it up, it's not considered. See, section 1C prohibits the transfer of trash. Oh, by the way, there was a discrepancy whenever we met with Tim the other day. We asked that inspections would be done twice a month, not bi-monthly, not every 2 months, but twice a month. So every 2 weeks, roughly. And I think you recall that's what it was, but I think bi-monthly does indicate 60 days, and I think that was just probably misconstrued, but I think we had asked for every 2 weeks. And I'll just conclude with one thing. I know how I would be if I was sitting in your seat. I would try to put myself in the shoes of the people that I'm with. I would not want to shove that down somebody's throat that, oh, tough luck, trash facility is going to be in your area. This type of facility needs to be in a special place, not in a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. What we shall do is take a 5-minute recess. We'll resume at 9 o'clock. We've been doing this 2 hours. And we'll begin then, public comment is now closed. And we'll begin with rebuttal from the applicant. And I did write down all the items on each of the people that got up and talked about that. So we'll make sure. Okay? Back at 9 o'clock.
was up at 3 this morning.
Okay.
We get the coyotes almost every night in the wetlands down there. But,
No, not here in town.
yeah, I always
we don't
thought
hear
that
the coyotes.
Are we back on?
was going to be great until it keep me up at night. Yeah, the city council, like, this stuff's all out for those meetings.
Yeah, that's right.
You gotta get yourself.
It's a suit.
I'll give us 30 seconds for everybody to
Oh, well, yeah, there.
kind of get back, and then we'll start. Rebuttal from the applicant.
Thank you. I took notes, and I'll try to answer them in the order that I can, and I'll do the best to complete those items that I can speak to, and obviously staff may have other comments to add to this. Just a brief conversation about the legal issues associated with Teller County. The lawsuit that was brought in the mid-'90s against Teller County Waste was about the operation of a transfer station on the site. There was a lawsuit. There was a court order to stop transfer of trash, which they operated a transfer station where you could bring garbage, put it into a truck, and it would get hauled away. And there is a state definition for what a transfer station is. I can get that code if you'd like. I have that with me. After the lawsuit, Mr. Baker ceased operations of the transfer station. He kept his business operation of running a Teller County Waste on the site, which means that he had his trucks parked in the back. That's where they took off in the morning and came back in the evening. There are on occasions when trash is stored in that truck overnight when the truck is not full, that goes out in the next morning to finish its collection and then go down to Colorado Springs to dump its load. It is not a transfer station in which the public or the operator takes trash from a commercially routed truck or from a personal vehicle and puts it into another vehicle. The state defines recycling under a different section of the state code, under CDPHE. And recycling centers have a different definition than a transfer station, which talks about refuse and garbage and trash, not recyclables, which can be are termed differently. And as a matter of term, the City of Woodland Park Code has a definition of recycling, and it talks about in this, for the purpose of this definition, collection means aluminum, steel, copper, plastic, glass, paper, bottles, cans, clothing, household goods, or similar items which may be recycled or for remanufacturing, processing, or reuse. And that is the nature of the recycling collection center. It takes those products, and there are specific products that Teller County Waste collects. It does not include batteries. It does not include hazardous waste. It does not include a list of items that are contained on the Teller County Waste website on what is allowed to be recycled and also what is allowed to be put in your trash. Because there is a manned operator on site, if someone comes in and decides to try and throw a car battery into the recycling truck, that will be taken out, and that person will have to take it to a proper hazardous waste recycling center at a different location, not at this site. And that's one of the functions that the operations person on site is ensuring that that recyclables that are permitted are what gets put into the recycling truck. There was a question about what contractor services are. Contractors and contractor services are those individuals that do a business for hire. And I believe Sally can get into that in greater detail. There was some discussion about the neighborhood notification, and the applicant does not handle that, and so staff would be able to discuss that. There is the discussion about trash in trucks overnight. We discussed that in a recent neighborhood meeting we had with the neighbors. Was talked about particularly concerns over wet refuse. That type of refuse is typically from commercial routes, particularly restaurants. As I discussed earlier, those routes are collected on Mondays and Fridays from the commercial uses, and those trucks are full and need to go down the pass for that purpose. Obviously, there are bears in Woodland Park. I'm sure you've seen them all on a number of occasions. Obviously, we don't want to be an attractive nuisance on that. The Packer trucks are enclosed to try and minimize that, along with the fencing, and trying to minimize those odors by keeping the wet refuse off the site is the intent at this time. The recycling processing, there was discussion about having that within an enclosed building. That was shown as a potential use. At this time, we are not planning to put a building up for that recycling processing or a collection location. The Packer truck will get closed and contained and compressed when there needs to be additional room or at night, and will be secured. If there is an intent to put a building around that recycling collection site, we'll come back in for an amendment to our plan and go back through the same process that you have today. There was discussion about stormwater runoff from the site and down the ditch. So today, this site in particular, and I can only speak to this site, has zero containment of any stormwater. When a rain event or precipitation event happens, it hits the compacted gravel, which is essentially impervious, runs off the site undetained and unfettered. And so it contributes immediately to the capacity problem within the ditch along the adjacent roadway. The detention facility that is up on the upper area to handle that initial runoff is designed to collect that water and hold it for a longer period of time to let the sediment collect in a specially designed the sand filter that's proposed for the detention facility is above City of Woodland Park standards to address the concerns of stormwater runoff from this yard area. That sand filter is intended to be for areas that have a yard space like this, and that's the type of facility that we've designed for this location. So as that water runs off the site and collects into the detention pond, the runoff is restricted because of the way the detention pond is constructed. The orifice allows for only a smaller amount of water. It will release and be in the channel longer as that allows it to release, but it will not be immediate and first flush into the pond or into the ditch because the pond will contain it. And so some of that initial flush that's occurring today will be improved by the site, plus with the improvements along the frontage and continuation of the drainage through there will also be better containment of that stormwater runoff as it utilizes the ditch system. The containment and enclosure of the yard prior to operations, our discussions and our annexation agreement identifies that operations can occur. Today's operations, no increase in vehicles, no increase of employees, can occur on the site, and Teller County Waste can continue to operate on site. It can do no additional improvements from what is current or additional capacity from what is currently happening at the time of annexation until all the improvements are installed. Mr. Baker is anxious to get started on those improvements, and weather permitting will begin the construction of the wall and grading and those other improvements immediately upon approval of these plans in order for him to move forward. He is motivated to get that completed because the city is going to be holding $260,000 in assurances to ensure that gets done. So that containment and enclosure issue was addressed somewhat in the annexation agreement. We are moving ahead with cleanup of the site. We talked about the debris, the firewood that was observed on site, and the welding materials. Those are being cleaned up at this time today. And actually, I believe Sally and the code enforcement officer visited with Jay on site shortly after annexation to kind of talk about getting the site cleaned up as things move forward. The discussion regarding the north property line and screening along the north property line. I believe this was Mr. Gidlin's discussion. So this is his property immediately to the north. Highway 24 is here. I believe his comment and concern was about screening along his property. Currently the site is vacant at this time, which is why there was no screening proposed, because there is no use on the property. It is zoned A1, I believe, in the county. Is that correct, Mr. Gidlin? It's A1 in the county? Okay. And so, again, at this time, because there was no use, there was no screening planned at that location. Regarding the easement driveway issue, Sally mentioned, and I briefly touched on earlier, is there is an area of questionable title along the boundary with the Turner's property immediately to the east of the site. Brief history on that based upon our surveyor, Kevin Lloyd, who surveyed this property, and his explanation as he presented it to me is that the original survey, which created the meets and bounds descriptions of these parcels, including Mr. Gidlin's, used a section line that is approximately 30 feet to the east of this site. When the Sunny Slope Acres subdivision plat was platted, it used a section line that was different, that overlapped the previous section line by about that 30 feet. The easement description that Mr. Gidlin described, that he had easements from CDOT about where that easement location basically was centered along this driveway, and basically from this point of the building went north and south and had a 15-foot either side of the driveway, which we are maintaining for his access. When you look at the survey that we received because of the dispute of the property boundary and the section line, the easement as currently described by Kevin Lloyd is that the easement actually extends through the house in this location. So the quitclaim boundary issue we know about, well documented. The intent of the easement is still being preserved. As was discussed, this driveway access here will not be gated, will not prevent Mr. Gidlin access to his property, and it is restricted to not have trucks and operations from the Teller County Waste Facility along this roadway. So that driveway is paved to here, is gravel here, and will continue to maintain his access. The easement and its exact location relative to that driveway is in dispute, just like the property line is in dispute on the other side. If we need to correct it to address Mr. Gidlin's concern, that can occur. The way we're correcting the situation with the Turner's property is that we will be doing a quitclaim deed to end my client's property dispute with the Turners will be resolved in that my client is quitting any claim to the property. So it's a quit claim to ownership of that ground, and that will be dedicated to the Turners with the approval, and that was part of the annexation agreement, that property be transferred. And so the easement, exact easement location and the property line dispute are one and the same as far as how the error occurred. The intent of the easement is clearly being maintained, and that driveway is being provided for that access to the property to the north. As far as metal recycling, again, I touched on that earlier, and that the allowed uses that are occurring in there, no batteries, no hazardous wastes, those uses will not be allowed. And then there was discussion about the definition of harmony and adjacent property owner use, and what improvements are we making on this site to be harmonious with the surrounding properties. You can see that there's not harmony today, right? We recognize that the site is not, from an appearance standpoint, is not up to Woodland Park standards. Is also is in disrepair. Mr. Baker has been leasing the property from the property owner for some time. He now owns title to both parcels, is platting the property as discussed, and with that effort is intending to create a business which is consistent with Woodland Park standards, and will do its best to be a good neighbor. Is the use the crux of the issue? Obviously it is. That's an operation and a management standpoint. Mr. Baker is committed to making sure that everything that has been discussed in the staff report and the conditions and operations standards that are being put on the property will be maintained, and as the property continues to operate in the future, I'm sure there will be lots of eyes watching to ensure that that occurs. There's always a transition area between non-residential and residential uses where we believe that we are providing adequate buffering and screening and mitigation to the extent possible on the property as presented. There was some, again, definition of the from the state of what a transfer station is, and I believe Sally has spoken with the state, and I am not able to speak with that conversation, and she should be able to provide you that information. Concerns about the unofficial bypass. The traffic report that was presented utilized traffic counts that were done specifically for this application. And so there were tube counts that were done to generate our traffic report. So whatever traffic from an existing condition standpoint was reflected in our traffic report from the work that I believe that the counts were done in April of this past year, or just a few months ago, to reflect the traffic conditions on the site. There was I'm trying to remember here if there's the parking spaces. There was a discussion about the parking spaces on the site and how many trucks. We have 12 contractor commercial vehicle parking spaces that are sized for the current trash trucks that Mr. Baker operates. They are wider and longer than normal standard parking spaces. We then have 14 employee spaces up on the yard. So those are the drivers of those vehicles, and the employees that work up in the yard will park in that area. If we fill those 12 up, which I don't expect to anytime soon, I don't believe there's any plans for that, and we need one more space, we will be back here and having this conversation again, just like what occurred or what I mentioned with the building to enclose the recycling processing center. The inspection of the site, obviously the city is going to maintain that and move that forward. There was another question that I took from one of the neighbors about a comment in our write-up about one of the questions Sally asked in our review was, where is your dumpster location for your trash? Where if you generate trash in your maintenance building, where is that going to go? And I discussed that there would be a 96-gallon toter placed in potentially in two locations. One would be on the back side of the building, and another would be over by the recycling drop-off area. And there was a question about what a 96-gallon toter is, and I don't have it, but pulled it up on my iPad, and it's a large. Oh, come on, there we go. It's a large trash can with a lid on it, and then that will handle the trash generated from the operations on the site. That will then be emptied into one of the vehicles prior to it leaving the site, just like any other commercial business has a trash collection process. Those are the items that I had on my list, and I'd be happy to compare lists if there are other questions you had of me at this time for items I didn't cover.
Did you cover everything?
Can you explain the state criteria for the 200-foot buffer zone?
If you can, I need to grab some paperwork from my briefcase.
And while he's doing that, I had a chance to speak with the Jerry Henderson, who is from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. He is in charge of regulating landfills and transfer stations. On the 26th of September, when Jerry and I spoke, I described to him the contractor services operation with parking of the 12 trash trucks and the roll-off trucks on the site. And he specifically said to me, that is not something I regulate. It is not a transfer station. It is not the handling of garbage. It is contained within the Packer trucks, and it is not being handled. So therefore, it is not a transfer or a landfill, and is therefore not regulated by the state. Then we discussed the recyclables, and he was, as a drop-off recycling center, these are standard operations that occur in many places. In fact, we had one at Walmart for several years, and those two are not regulated by the state. So Jerry gave me a level of confidence that we were representing the contractor services adequately to you. And to further about our slotting of contractor services, this is not trash handling. This is under the section that is item F, and we just reviewed our entire matrix, so we went over this recently. It's under the automotive, RV, travel trailer, boat sales, services, and rentals. I'm sorry, it's under item G, which is contract services and construction services. It says, number one, there are only two sections to this. Number one, building, well drilling, landscaping, electrical, and plumbing contractors with all outside storage of goods, materials, and equipment screened from public view by an approved fence or other approved buffering. Outside storage of goods, materials, and equipment shall not intrude upon any required front or side yard. This area, even though it does not say the parking of trash trucks, it does refer to contractor services, and hauling solid waste is a contractor service that is provided to our community. It doesn't mention excavators or that type of service, but that would be a contractor service as well. It relates to building services. So that's how it is slotted in our matrix. And further, the other question about notices to property owners. Sending letters is one of 3 approaches to noticing the neighbors. The first and foremost is to publish the notice in the required newspaper, in our official newspaper. So those notices are sent to the courier and they are posted in the public notice area so that all the community can see what is coming up on the docket. That is number 1. Number 2 is the public notice sign that is posted on the property, which neighbors are usually see the public notice signs more so than they read the courier in the public notice section of the courier. The third is that at a courtesy we send notices, letters to the surrounding property owners. Sometimes we don't have the right addresses and people move and we don't have their mailbox numbers and we don't always get those out, but it does not invalidate the hearing if a letter does not show up to those surrounding property owners. So that's the noticing requirements. And I know Mr. Gidlin received a letter early on because he and I spoke several months ago when we first started this process.
Has the iPad rescued you?
It did, and now I remember. I thought I had printed it off in my briefcase, but I remember that the Department of Public Health and Environment Hazardous Materials and Waste Management Division regulations pertaining to solid waste sites and facilities is 419 pages long. So I decided not to print it off, and I put it on my iPad. And so on page 152 is the definition of transfer station, and it's clear in state statute that transfer stations and landfills have a required 200-foot buffer from any residential uses. So that's when you meet that criteria for a transfer station or a landfill as defined by Colorado Public Health and Environment, they have a buffer standoff distance and go into further definition on what can and can't occur in that buffer distance. Again, as Sally mentioned, it applies only when that definition of a transfer station is met.
At this point, are you through with your rebuttal?
I am, unless you have any other questions.
This is where you would ask any final questions of applicant or staff before we go into deliberation.
I have one more. I think it'd be helpful to get the clarification of a day-to-day process. Just to clarify that this is not a transfer station.
Sure.
My understanding is that vehicles will be parked there overnight, some not full. They would go back out, fill up, and then they dump. Where do they dump?
They go to the Bestway transfer facility in Colorado Springs, adjacent or out off of Highway 24 near Peterson Air Force Base.
Okay, so each one of those trucks
makes a drive down the pass when it is full to deliver the garbage.
Okay, so
at
this
that
is
location.
basically a holding facility, an overnight holding facility in a sealed truck.
Correct.
Okay. Because the definition of a transfer station is a building or processing site for the temporary deposition of waste. Transfer stations are often used as places where local waste collection vehicles will deposit their waste cargo prior to loading into larger vehicles. And my experience with transfer stations is they're usually an enclosed building. It's dumped out, it's loaded into large trucks, packed, and then sent to a larger collection facility or to a facility that is basically a landfill. Is that?
That is correct. And that facility where these trucks go to is exactly that type of facility. It's a large metal building with a concrete floor. And they dump out the back of the packer truck onto the floor, and then it gets loaded into a larger vehicle.
So Divide, for example, is a clear example.
Divide is a transfer station.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
One question.
It was the one from August 15th staff report that said, however, the collected recyclable material will be manually unloaded from a separate compartment to a wheeled packing truck that will be transported to best way materials. And I asked if that's how that's going to work, because to me that is transferring trash.
It's recyclable, not trash.
Remember what refuse was? Refuse was still
She's right.
recyclables and trash. Is that
Yep.
It is true that the recyclables that are collected into a separate compartment for the curbside recycling operation that Teller County Waste will be doing through the neighborhoods will be handled or transferred. I'll use the term transferred, but these are recyclables. They are not trash. And the refuse definition that Ms. Allen referred to is the refuse definition for a nuisance. That is in the nuisance code that is enforced under a separate area. It's not in the zoning code.
Okay, I'm going to be really dense here. So, what you're referring to, the recyclables that being transferred, are these the ones that they pick up
At
door
the
to door?
Door to door, curbside.
And they're not put into the same trash truck as the rest of the trash?
It is in the same trash truck, but a separate compartment. So the recyclables are kept separately from the garbage. And it's no different than if you were transporting your recyclables to the drop-off center and you unloaded them from your car.
You have recyclable. It's like some of the cities that put out different kind of bins. Some are trash, some are recyclables.
In
They
fact,
have
they
compartments
require
in the
that
truck.
you identify your recyclables by writing on your bag, recyclable or an R, before they will put it into that compartment.
Let's move on, because we're at the point where we can begin deliberation and give all your personal opinions, whatever you want to do. And let's do that. Let's just start out and go around. Dan, do you want to start that off about any questions, information you still seek, things you want to discuss?
Yes.
Before we get to the point of voting.
Sure. About this signed petition, it's of a little bit of a concern to me about the signed petition. Sally, can you explain what that was?
I frankly do not even have a copy of that. It was turned in to the city clerk at a hearing and was entered into the record for the hearing for the annexation.
Okay. Just a thought on that. If indeed it was 75 people, and that's less than 1% of the population of the city, what's the population of the people who live around the site? I'm not sure that criteria, I'd like to see that criteria at some point, but anyway, since we haven't seen that, I'm not sure what we can do about it. I guess the thing that I'm looking at is the alternative to not having control over the site as it currently is, I think becomes a big issue, because it can continue as is for as long as it goes, as long as whoever wants to run it for whatever business they want to run it. And so there's a lack of control there and lack of regulation. And so the county currently has that control, correct? Is supposed to have the control over that, over the site, or not?
As of August 15th, when the annexation was approved by city council,
Okay.
then it became under the jurisdiction of the city.
So it's the city. And so by moving into this as a controllable entity, now we have more control over what happens with the site. Is that realistic?
It's realistic in terms of the city has more stringent standards
Right.
than Teller County,
Okay.
Specifically grading and erosion control.
Right.
There are no standards that Teller County has in their land use regs
Right.
that deal with.
We'll also be able to regulate through code enforcement whether the fences get painted and, or maintained, and whether trees that die are replanted, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And smells, noises, so on and so forth are also regulated. Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Steve?
I have no more issues.
Mr. Rollinger?
Well, I think the applicant's done a good job. The plans for improvement, upgrading, et cetera. And I think they've certainly made a good faith effort to answer the demands of the property owners, although clearly, parties always disagree on one point or another. I do feel that at the outset, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to have our code enforcement officer in there more frequently than bi-monthly, certainly monthly, if not more often during the outset of the operation. That's all I've got.
Yeah, I agree. I think that bi-monthly is just not an option for me.
Can I address that issue, Mr. Chairman? Because we've got a little bit of a disconnect by that being put in there as a condition. Conditions in conditional use permits are there because the property owner has control over that. So the property owner has no control over what the city's code enforcement officer does. So while that is there really as sort of the culmination of the negotiation that the city had really with the neighbors, and something that the city can really make an effort to do, that is going to be done as city code officers' time permits, as city budget permits. And that's not to say that the city is not going to make the effort to send a code enforcement officer there. And whether or not the city can do that once a month, twice a month, or once every 2 months is really not something that can necessarily be directed by the Planning Commission. So I would just point that out. And it's not really something that, it's not anything that the applicant has control over.
Oh, true.
So-
True. Would you feel any different, Counselor, whether this property was surrounded by residences where the folks were residents of Woodland Park?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, that's
No
not.
difference.
Yeah,
No
that's not
difference.
the distinction. The distinction isn't who are the neighbors. The issue is who controls what the
Right.
police chief does or the planning director does in the city is not the applicant. So
No, I wasn't implying that you were treating them differently. I'm just asking the question.
So the conditions are for the applicant, is what basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So really that shouldn't be a condition.
Marty, were you through?
Interesting.
Well, the only other comment that I had was the legal issues that are going on with Teller County and with Teller County Waste and the neighbors. Is that not something that we should have a concern about? I mean, is it's moot? Is it over? Is it done? Or
yeah, that's not a concern for the planning commission. So the planning commission can certainly move forward. What you do is make a recommendation to the city council.
Your turn. Your turn.
I concur with Mr. Rollinger. I think that the applicant has presented. Oh, hello?
Get closer.
Now?
Closer.
I just think the applicant has done an outstanding job at taking what's there that we've all seen. I've been on site also and has made a good faith effort to create a business that meets Woodland Park standards. And so I'm looking forward to see how that all turns out. And I think that it's a big improvement to what's there today.
Mr. Watson. I basically agree. We're here to, I think, tonight to determine whether or not the applicant has faithfully met our criteria here in the city, and as far as I'm concerned, he has. And I echo, to me, now that it's part of the city, why we get rid of an eyesore if all this takes place. So,
Mr. Yoxheimer.
I guess like the only issue I had was with, if you look on the staff report under page 7, the criteria 3, I just don't think that one's been quite met for me. And that just says proposed development, the use will not substantially injure the value of the vicinity properties. If I'm looking to come into Woodland Park, and I'm looking at a house and it's located next to a recycling center, trash center, anything like that, I probably wouldn't want to go there. I guess that's my only thing. And then it's just like, I guess how it wording it will not substantially injure the value of the neighborhood, but there's no, I guess, evidence to support that, against or for.
seems to me it'll improve the value of the homes around there compared to what it is now.
Like now.
If you look at it now, and for the last several years, why, it seems to me that's more of a detriment than what's being proposed.
But do they have anything? They're just basing it off what they said in existence since '94. It'll have improvements, but they don't know if it's actually going to increase the value or decrease the value. So that's just the thing. There's nothing there to support that.
There's no data either way.
Exactly.
Well,
So we have to go to our
crystal-
best recommendation of if we're going to have a recycling center so close that's located into town for Woodland Park, that we have to look at that. So that's all I have.
I got a couple things, and one of them will involve the applicant. When we have rain like we had in Waldo Canyon and like we've had this summer, the filter system that's in that parking lot where it will collect through the sand filter and the retention pond, specification-wise, is it going to handle a 100-year flood? Is it going to handle 6 inches of rain in 10 hours? Or are we going to take all that stuff and dump it out in the ditch? What's the contingency plan if it's overloaded by excessive rain?
The city standards for detention facilities are that they are required to handle the 100-year storm event. Our drainage report prepared by JPS Engineering and reviewed by Bill Allsbach clearly identifies that it can handle that, and is also oversized slightly to handle a little bit in excess of the 100-year event. The sand filter itself, so if you're familiar with the regular detention pond, it has it's kind of a standpipe, for lack of a better term, an outlet structure that as water fills into it, it allows release of water at a controlled amount, and then at the top it allows, if it fills to the brim, it will allow that water to, if it reaches beyond that 100-year capacity, it allows that water out and down the drainage system downstream. The detention capacity of that pond is still there. It just means that the rain is in excess of that 100-year event. And so the outlet structure and the pond continues to operate, but as it overtops that in these kind of unique rain events we've had in the last month or so, if we reach above that 100-year event, it would trigger its overflow capacity at the top of that orifice and then run down the pipe from that location. And that's true of any of your detention ponds around around town. They are all designed, all the ones that I'm aware of in Woodland Park are designed to a 100-year standard. And so once a rain event exceeds that 100-year capacity, all bets are off in all your detention
I
facilities.
have no problem with retention ponds flowing, but the other retention ponds aren't collecting the runoff from trash vehicles. Okay, and as long as the filter system handles that amount of water, and what comes out of there is clean, if it goes over the dam, so to speak, let it go over the dam because it's already gone through it. It's already gone through the filter system before it goes to the retention pond.
Correct. And the best way I can describe this, and I have a copy of the drainage report, and I believe Sally has pulled hers up as well. The capacity of the pond, the sand filter is a water quality feature to do just as you described. It has a subsurface drainage system below that as the stormwater filters through the sand and through that structure to that subsurface detention, it's removing solids and other materials out of the water prior to then its ultimate discharge. In the event of a 100-year storm, the pond is full and it is overtopping. As is any other site in town, the runoff that comes off of this yard would be just the same as what would be coming off streets and other facilities in that unique condition.
Does that sand filter system have to have maintenance?
It does.
To remove all those solids
Yes,
in that?
it does. It has a maintenance program associated with it.
Is that an EPA issue?
No, it's a stormwater quality issue as managed by the city.
So the city has to inspect that to make sure that's done, or they have to have some kind of controls that there's some kind of a check done and that thing has been cleaned on a regular basis.
Right. And there's a maintenance program with every detention pond.
Okay.
So sediment in a regular detention pond gets cleared on a regular basis.
Okay.
Similar conditions with this pond.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that we've talked about is trash versus recycling. And the only thing that I can relate to is when we set up the recycling operation at Walmart. You all recall that. At the time when we looked at that, from a city standpoint, when we were going to approve that, and it went into a contract with the Boy Scouts and a service to do that, it was cost prohibitive. The cost of removing all that and that was a charge that was going to be involved in thousands of dollars per year. Woodland Trash donated a year's worth of service. They picked up that trash, or the recyclable. I know it's all one word, but I mean they picked up that stuff, repainted their receptacles, put brand new white, nice, clean units out there. He fulfilled his obligation with the city for a year. It was then taken over by another company, and that's worldwide. And it turned into the biggest mess in the world. They never were cleaned. They never were emptied. The receptacles they put out there were half rusted. It must have been what was left over. And it got to the point that whole thing stopped. Okay. Given the track record, I think that same level of keeping it clean and that same problem of the stuff overflowing and too much stuff there took place for when Woodland Trash had that for a year. And that was picked up by them and was cleaned up by them, and they did their year's duty on that stuff. Having an attended site where there's going to be somebody there watching what comes in there, and the fact of the track record of how they do that, I think that will be a pretty decent operation to do that. The people that live in the neighborhood are the people that have to be the code enforcement. If there's a problem, you have to call. Because we got to fix it before it gets a problem. Don't wait 2 months to notify somebody that there's a problem out there. Don't do that. Get a hold of us. Get a hold of the city and get out there and correct it. You recall them saying if they go over 12 trucks, they have to come back again. Whether that's approved or not and whether that ever happens will be based on their track record, their performance. how well they satisfied the folks that live in the neighborhood, how good of neighbors they are to do that. That's all part of it. And again, what Joe Watson said, I'm sorry, I think what's there now hurts your neighborhood more than an operation if it's run according to what the conditional uses are that we installed. It'll be a cleaner, neater operation, in my opinion. I'm off my chair. Anybody, we're looking for a motion? Further discussion? Public comments closed. Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the Teller County Waste application with the conditions provided in the staff report.
If I may, just based on Ms. Smith's comments, take out item G, 1G, which is the code enforcement requirement, and replace that with fencing shall be stained and maintained in good condition.
Yes.
And then also the change to the time for the drop-off to 8 a.m. So that would capture your concerns about making sure the fencing is well maintained, and Ms. Smith's concerns about us tying ourselves to a condition that is not really the applicant's responsibility.
I'm looking for a second.
I will second the motion, but with that, I would say, and I said it before at the last meeting on this, we have more control than the county does. It's not going to go away, but the city has more control. And I personally will be driving by there on a weekly basis when it's up and operational. I will make that commitment, so I will second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. We need to call for the question.
Thank you. DeVoe?
Yes.
Watson?
Yes.
Mattingly?
Yes.
Probst?
Yes.
Rollinger?
Aye.
Stannard?
Yes.
Vogel?
Yes.
And Yoxheimer.
No.
Okay. Motion passes 7-1.
This isn't the last time you have an opportunity to do this. We still have the council that this thing has to go through. Excuse me? This is over with. Okay. Now, do we have anything else? No, we still have reports. Director's reports. We need to continue on. The next item on our agenda.
Just that we have another meeting in 2 weeks, and we will have the conditional use for the Tractor Supply Company.
I don't have a report.
Sally, what
That
will,
is it.
all the zoning stuff that we just completed, is that being worked, repackaged and?
Yes, we'll come back and have a workshop and continue to discuss that, as well as the accessory dwelling units.
That's what we were talking about.
Any other?
Accessory
Is there,
dwelling, that's what we're doing
this
later.
does have to be part of the meeting, but is there any way we can get our paperwork before Monday? Like a meeting?
Yeah, we apologize about the short
Because this is
turnaround.
a lot to go through.
We were out of town last week and
I
could
know.
not get all the pieces put together before we.
I read everything except look at the plans because I figured I'd get to see that here.
So have
I couldn't get
plans
through
on
any more of
site
that.
and everything. But it was.
Do you want these back?
It was just a short period of time.
Sure, I'd like to.
Anything else? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're out of here.
Thank you.
This stuff's gonna go to council. It's always safe.
No, I have the whole thing.
Typically, we give this so that